Newsmaker Shashi Tharoor and our debate. And joining me now first is author and member of parliament Dr. Shashi Tharoor, whose new book, of course, Paradoxical Prime Minister, looks at Prime Minister Modi. Mr. Tharoor, one of the paradoxes of Mr. Modi was perhaps seen today. The strong man perhaps needed to appropriate the iron man. The images of Mr. Modi with Sardar Patel. How do you see that?
Well, I must say it's a bit troubling. On the one hand, honoring Sardar Patel is a great thing, and I'm very glad the country has done it, though I'm not sure that he himself would have found this gigantic outside statue the most appropriate way of honoring him. But the appropriation of Sardar Patel's legacy by this government, and particularly this Prime Minister, is troubling at various levels. I'm drawn particularly to think about, not just the question of India's unity, which indeed Sardar Patel built and which sadly is being threatened by a divisive government, but even more so by the fact that when you look at concrete examples from the lives of Sardar Patel and those who would appropriate his legacy, you really see no parallel. I'll just give you one example. Sardar Patel also had to deal with serious communal rioting and violence in 1947, just as Narendra Modi had to deal with it in 2002. In 1947, what did Sardar Patel do? He took swift and immediate action to rescue Muslims who were being attacked. He moved thousands of them into the security of the Red Fort so they could be protected better. Because he was worried about the neutrality of the local police and law enforcement authorities, he called for troops from Pune and Madras because he felt they'd be less swayed by the passions of the moment in Delhi. And he personally made it a point as Home Minister of India to go to Nizamuddin and offer prayers as a way of signaling that Islam continued to have an honored place in Indian society. He also went to Amritsar and managed to persuade angry Hindu and Sikh mobs not to massacre departing Muslims on the trains who were crossing over into Pakistan. What a set of examples Patel set. And do we find any equivalence for that in 2002? Even if we accept everything that is said in defense of the Chief Minister of Gujarat at that time, did we see him take any extraordinary measures to reassure the Muslim population, to bring security to the Muslim population, to go and offer symbolic visit to a mosque or a masjid in order to show, as Patel did with the Nizamuddin Dargah? I'm sorry, there is simply no parallel between the conduct of one individual when faced with communal violence and another individual when faced with communal violence. How can one appropriate the legacy of the other when their stories are so completely dissimilar?
But the reason why, in a sense, this appropriation is being, in a sense, justified by the BJP is because they claim constantly that the Congress built memorials to the Nehru-Gandhi family. The Congress had programs in the name of the Nehru-Gandhi family. The BJP is, in a sense, honoring a Congress giant that you forgot. That's the line, that's the narrative. So while you now claim that the legacy of Mr. Patel is very different to that of Mr. Modi, the BJP says we are filling a gap in history.
Well, listen, gaps are all very well to fill, and I'm very pleased that Sardar Patel is being honored, though, as I said, I doubt that he would have been I think he would have been taken aback by such an outsized statue. And you realize what a simple man he was, how much he valued his own ascetic life and his own simplicity of being. The way in which, as you know, he began his career as a satyagrahi, working and walking among peasants, encouraging them not to pay iniquitous British taxes. He was a man of the organization, a man of the masses. This statue, I think, would frankly have embarrassed him. But if at all the government feels that there are too many statues to the Nehru-Gandhi dynasty and so on, why not Mahatma Gandhi? If you want an iconic figure the whole world recognizes, to have the largest statue in the world, surely Sardar Patel himself would have said, I am the disciple, go to the Mahatma and let me have a statue of him that we can all look at. So, all the statue politics is something which the BJP is in a better position to explain than you and I watching from outside.
But I read a piece of yours in February when Mr. Modi in Parliament had attacked Jawaharlal Nehru on partition, on Kashmir, saying he was responsible for both, and contrasted him with Patel, who was unifying the country. And therefore the argument would go, the Congress party honored Nehru while he was living with the Bharat Ratna. It took 41 years to honor Patel. He got it only in 1991, died in 1950. These are all facts also. So there is a counter narrative today also, Shashi Tharoor, to this entire argument.
But of course, Rajdeep, no one claims, me least of all, as a writer of history and a writer of popular fiction, I hope, I would not claim only one narrative. All my books testify to the existence of multiple narratives, especially my fiction. But my answer to you here would be that the problem was that Sardar Patel died in 1950. Nehruji got his Bharat Ratna in 1955. And the fact is that Sardar Patel, at that point, had already passed away, and they were not issuing posthumous Bharat Ratnas. It was only much later that the rules were accommodated to permit the posthumous awards. And Sardar Patel was indeed amongst the first. I think it was Narasimha Rao's government, if I remember
That's right,
rightly,
1991.
that gave it to him. So when it became possible to give a posthumous award, when it became possible to give a posthumous award, they gave it to him. The Congress party has always had great respect for Sardar Patel. It is simply a historical tragedy that he only lived for 3 years after independence, and those who lived much longer naturally had a chance to make a much bigger contribution, a much longer lasting contribution in some ways, in terms of things that were memorialized. But we remember Sardar Patel by his institutions also, Rajdeep. We remember because it's thanks to him that we have the IAS. It's thanks to him that modern Indian policing has the shape it has. It's thanks to him that the entire steel frame of the Indian government was maintained. And it's time to recall institutions on a day in which the brazen assault on the nation's institutions is continuing by the BJP government, with today's unprecedented attack on the Reserve Bank of India. All the institutions that those founding fathers sought to put on a firm footing for 70 years, starting with the unity of the country that Sardar Patel so effectively wrote about, is now being hollowed out by assaults on one institution after another by the BJP.
Let me ask you one final question then. What does all this tell us about, according to you, as someone who's written a book now on Narendra Modi, about the Modi persona? The idea of building a larger-than-life image for himself is part, many say in your book also, of the Modi persona. Someone who's told the country once that I have a 56-inch chest. Is this all part of it? 182-foot statue, everything larger than life when it comes to the Modi persona? A quick answer.
That's right. I think it's as larger than life than the 56-inch chest is, especially when one looks at the actual concrete results in terms of policy. No, let's be very honest about this. Mr. Modi has a certain outsized view of himself, of his own role, and has built up assiduously a personality cult that has led to talk of Moditva, which I have mentioned in my book, which is a combination of Hindutva and Modi. That is the personality of Mr. Modi larger than life. And pretty much everything that he wants to be associated with has to be the largest, the tallest, the biggest, the loudest. And frankly, this statue fits into that. It's certainly not for most Indians, I think, an aspiration they would have thought to. Most Indians would rather have seen 3,000 crores being spent on things that would actually improve the lives of our most unfortunate. But fair enough, we now have a statue. I am a great admirer of Sardar Patel's. I've written about him in my books and essays. I hope lots of people go and visit, and I hope at least it brings in tourist revenue into the country. But the person who built it and the motives for which it was built, to my mind, remain deeply suspect.
Okay, let me leave it at that. Shashi Tharoor has set off our debate. I appreciate your joining us. His recent book, of course, The Paradoxical Prime Minister, on Narendra Modi. Thank you very much